Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this September 16, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Tonight we open up with news related to the weather out of Mexico. Hurricane Odile damages Mexico's Baja, California resorts.
After the big storm, the big cleanup. This southern tip of Mexico's Baja, California peninsula had not been battered like this in 60 years. Whole neighborhoods were completely destroyed by Hurricane Odile, which ripped off roofs. When we arrived, everything was destroyed, she said. Everything was wet. It felt so sad, but that's nature. Now we just have to start to clean up everything that's left. Power cables were downed. Nearly 250,000 people have been left without electricity. Hurricane Odile slammed into the coast as a Category 3 storm, with wind speeds gusting over 200 kilometers an hour. The storm's surge caused flooding, as did the heavy rain, which it was feared would spark mudslides. People took what they could from stores. There's a fine line between survival and looting when such a powerful hurricane hits. Tens of thousands of tourists are believed to have survived the storm in temporary shelters in the various Los Cabos holiday resorts. But with clean water supplies affected and transport links down, they now face a challenge to leave an area so badly hit by the hurricane. Alistair Leithhead, BBC News, California.
Okay, friends, and that story, excuse me, that story, of course, relates to, I thought I was all right over that virus and infection I had last week that kind of left me weakened. I was stronger last night. Tonight, though, friends, I have a lot of stories, and we've got to go one to another. I want to show you our chart quickly at the beginning of the program tonight. Several stories we have that relate to the weather will relate to this fourth seal, fourth column over. You see the number 4. The fourth horse of Revelation is depicted there as a pale horse with a rider whose name is Death, alongside whom rides Hades, hell, the grave. And the deadly activities of this horse and its rider, this pale horse and its rider named Death, were described in plain language by Jesus Christ as the gospel writers Matthew, Mark, Luke wrote it up in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, in 3 different areas. One, loimos, disease epidemics, pestilences, the plagues of Egypt. Seismus, seismic activity, commotions in the air, commotions on the ground, such as the story that you just saw. Our next story relates to that as well, but I'll just mention the third element Jesus Christ mentioned was tereke, disturbances, troubled waters, both literally and figuratively, and mobs and seditions and that kind of things. And this next story relates to both the commotions on the ground with flooding and the literally aspect of tereke, troubled waters. Backlash after Kashmir floods are leaving thousands stranded.
The centre of Srinagar after its worst flood in living memory. Some are calling it Kashmir's Katrina, when the government was totally overwhelmed. We found a way in on foot as the waters begin to recede. It's just incredible, the devastation around here. This whole road has been completely washed away. And up ahead, I'm hearing things are even worse. This was once a better off neighbourhood. Many have lost everything. And Mohammed Dar says he feels abandoned by the government.
We made a makeshift bridge ourselves, and we have been trying to drain the water out. Nobody came to help us. You are the first person from outside we have seen here.
The centre of Srinagar has been utterly destroyed by this flood. Everywhere we go, we find buildings flattened, roads washed away. But what's most striking about this disaster is the amount of anger there is. And increasingly, that's becoming a backlash against the authorities. After decades of strife between Kashmir's Muslim majority and the government, the flood has brought old resentments back to the surface.
State government, we have not, till this date, this time, we have not seen this state government. We are angry, yeah, really, we are angry.
And they helped us, like, they dropped water bottles and biscuits. They were expired. Water bottles, they were 2009. Biscuits, 2009, 2008.
More aid is starting to come in, like this mobile drinking water service. And the authorities insist they're doing all they can. Yet in the heart of this historic city, it's not the government running the relief and recovery effort, but the people themselves. Andrew North, BBC News, in central Srinagar.
And friends, recapping, at least 100 people have died, with many missing, and there are mounting fears of disease spreading as criticism, as you just heard there, grows of the government response. And that was Andrew North with that report. Now, with the Ebola outbreak, the UN Security Council is in the news tonight. They're holding an emergency session.
For more than 6 months, Ebola has rampaged through parts of West Africa, infecting thousands regardless of age, and killing well over 2,000 people, including health workers battling against the odds to help those most in need. For months, the international community have been accused of not doing enough. Now, ahead of 2 key meetings of the United Nations and the UN Security Council, the US ambassador made this plea.
We can contain this, we know how to do it, and we must avoid panic and fear. But our collective response to date has not been sufficient.
Friz, I want to pause her right there and come out of that for just a moment, because I wanted you to catch that point she just made. She says, we know how to contain it. Well, maybe on a physical level, a certain amount can be done. But the real way to contain it is primarily, let me go ahead and let me grab my Bible here. It's primarily contained in this book called the Holy Bible, which represents the true Creator's Word. And in that book, as is summarized in this little small book that was one of the required books for one of my classes at Ambassador College, it explains what God says basically in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. If you obey me, I'll bless you. And if you don't, you will have curses. And this little book that was published in this was printed in May of 1968, just a couple of years before my freshman year at Ambassador College started in the fall of 1970. It was actually first published in 1963 by a doctor, S.I. Macmillan. It's called None of These Diseases. And the title of that book comes from a verse in the Bible that says, where God says, if you obey me, I'll put none of these diseases on you. That's the real way to lick this kind of disease, is for everybody to obey our Creator. Get down on our knees, repent, pray and repent where we haven't obeyed Him, and ask for His forgiveness, begin to obey, and then we wouldn't see outbreaks like this. But I just wanted to put that in, and let's go right back into this story.
We must move forward aggressively in a coordinated fashion and together.
It's highly unusual for the United Nations Security Council to meet and discuss public health issues, but this Ebola outbreak is unprecedented and has become the deadliest on record. One key factor being blamed on the rapid spread of the virus is a shortage of protective equipment. The United Nations is calling for $600 million to deal with the crisis and is asking countries to send supplies, including trucks, beds and doctors, to the worst affected areas. The latest move is set to come from President Obama, who is expected to send 3,000 troops to help build hospitals and train doctors. International efforts to combat the virus have been welcomed by the President of Ghana, who has been critical of the response so far.
With Ebola, I mean, it's a scary disease, and so when it started, getting people to come in and assist has not been easy. I do believe that the international response was slow, but happily it's picking up.
But in countries where health systems were already fragile, the promise of help couldn't come soon enough. Alpa Patel, BBC News.
Okay, thank you very much, Alpa Patel. And as Ms. Patel was reporting that story, friends, I punched into my little electronic concordance. This is a new one I'm not used to using. And let's see, I've got it in there. Now, which button do I push? I think maybe this one. Search is limited to... Okay, and it found it already. That verse that this book I was telling you about called None of These Diseases comes from Exodus 15, verse 26, where God says, "If you will diligently hearken to the voice of the eternal Lord your God, and will do that which is right in his sight, and will give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes," God says, "I will put none of these diseases upon you, which I've brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the eternal Lord God who heals you." So if you want to look that up or make a note of that for later, that's in Exodus 15 and verse 26. Now, friends, in our next story, we go to the President of the United States, who was mentioned in this last video, and he'll be explaining a little bit about how those 3,000 troops that he's planning to send will be used to build hospitals and that kind of thing.
Here's the hard truth. In West Africa, Ebola is now an epidemic of the likes that we have not seen before. It's spiraling out of control. It is getting worse. It's spreading faster and exponentially. Today, thousands of people in West Africa are infected. That number could rapidly grow to tens of thousands. And if the outbreak is not stopped now, we could be looking at hundreds of thousands of people infected, with profound political and economic and security implications for all of us. So this is an epidemic that is not just a threat to regional security, it's a potential threat to global security. If these countries break down, if their economies break down, if people panic, that has profound effects on all of us, even if we are not directly contracting the disease.
Now, there was President Obama speaking related to disease epidemics, the pale horse. Now, we're going to go to President Obama again in a moment here, but we're switching horses now. He's going to be speaking about the situation in the Middle East with ISIL and the Islamic State, where in this video President Obama is really switching gears. He's been saying time after time, no combat boots over there. But now, after meeting today, this report will tell us that U.S. ground forces could be deployed against Islamic State militants if the current U.S.-led strategy fails, according to top U.S. General Martin Dempsey.
The top political appointee and the top soldier, Defence Secretary Chuck Hagel and General Martin Dempsey, on the Hill to give evidence about how to take the fight to Islamic State. Some there wanted the president to pull back from a fresh conflict, but the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff went way beyond what the White House has been calling for.
My view at this point is that this coalition is the appropriate way forward. I believe that will prove true. But if it fails to be true, and if there are threats to the United States, then I, of course, would go back to the president and make a recommendation that may include the use of U.S. military ground forces.
This is what they call a photo spray, a quick chance to get a picture of retired Marine General John Allen, who'll lead the coalition fight against Islamic State, and the president as they met in the White House this morning. The cameras are long gone by the time anything of substance is discussed. But last week, in his address to the nation, the president could not have been more emphatic. There would be no boots on the ground.
It will not involve American combat troops fighting on foreign soil.
Last night, US planes targeted sites near Baghdad for the first time, proof of the expanded campaign against Islamic State. But as in previous conflicts, the military are warning there is a limit to what air power alone can achieve.
I'm concerned that we're going to become involved and do so in a way that doesn't provide for mission success. And then we could actually end up in a situation where the U.S. has to become more involved further because we didn't frame the problem.
The president was derided when he said he had no strategy for dealing with Islamic State, and so he went on television last week and said he wanted to see them destroyed. What the military appear to be saying is that that's fine, but you need to give us the tools to do the job. And that is something the president is extraordinarily reluctant to do. John Sopel, BBC News, Washington.
This is an Iraq-first strategy, but not an Iraq-only one. Job one is empowering the Iraqi ground forces to go on the offensive, which they're already beginning to demonstrate. This requires a partnership with a credible Iraqi government, which is also showing positive signs of becoming inclusive of all of its population. Within this partnership, our advisors are intended to help the Iraqis develop a mindset for the offensive and to take actions consistent with offensive. Our military advisors will help the Iraqis conduct campaign planning, arrange for enabler and logistics support, and coordinate our coalition activities. If we reach the point where I believe our advisors should accompany Iraq troops on attacks against specific ISIL targets, I'll recommend that to the president. As long as ISIL enjoys a safe haven in Syria, it will remain a formidable force and a threat. So, while this work in Iraq is taking place, we will simultaneously pressure ISIL in Syria. With coalition partners and contributions, we will begin building a force of vetted, trained, moderate Syrians to take on ISIL in Syria. We will work to ensure that they have a Syrian chain of command and report to a moderate political authority. This force will work initially at the local and community level and help pull together Syrians who have most felt the harsh hand of ISIL. In conjunction with that long-term effort, we will be prepared to strike ISIL targets in Syria that degrade ISIL's capabilities. This won't look like a shock and awe campaign because that's simply not how ISIL is organized, but it will be a persistent and sustainable campaign.
Friends, the U.S. military has announced that American planes have struck positions held by jihadists of the group Islamic State outside the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. The BBC's Jim Muir has visited the front line near IS-controlled Zumar, near Mosul, where Kurdish forces are fighting militants.
Well, this is pretty much the front line here on what is the latest focus of the attempts by the Kurds to push IS, the Islamic State, out of these parts of Kurdistan, which it overran so very quickly at the beginning of last month. Now, Zumar is the name of the town here, which is still being held by IS, but the Kurds have managed to close it off on the eastern side there, here on the north side, and on the south, those hills in the back are also held by the Kurds, but their problem is that IS has still got a passageway open on the west-hand side, connecting it up to Mosul, which of course is a very big city controlled by the IS militants. It's taken the Kurds 40 days to get to this point here is going to take them a lot more time to get to Mosul. This whole thing illustrates just how very hard it is to dislodge the Islamic State and what a massive task lies ahead to get them out of the rest of Iraq and indeed from Syria.
Okay, friends, and more on this story. Since President Obama set out his case for dealing with the Islamic State, IS militants, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has tried to rally support from across the Middle East. Yesterday, he met foreign ministers from 30 countries in Paris to agree a plan to tackle the jihadists. But two key regional players, Iran and Syria, were missing, and both have been publicly scornful of efforts to defeat IS without them. Gabriel Gatehouse reports from the front line of Peshmerga-held territory in northern Iraq.
It is on these fighters that the statesmen in Paris are pinning many of their hopes. This is one of the Peshmerga's front lines. That town in the distance is held by Islamic State. It was specifically Britain's support for Kurdish forces that the black-masked murderer of David Haines cited as justification for his killing. The UK is flying weapons and ammunition into northern Iraq to help bolster the Kurds.
The weapons we're getting from Britain and the others are good, and we have some weapons of our own, but it's not enough against the terrorist state. We need more to win our war against IS.
The Kurds have made modest advances against the jihadists here at Jalala, which is less than 100 miles from Baghdad. But many of their weapons are old and their stocks are depleted. They say they've yet to receive any of the guns or the ammunition supplied by Britain. This is about as far east as IS goes. We're almost on the border with Iran, but the jihadist state now stretches all the way west across Iraq, into Syria and up to the Turkish border. And each time another Western hostage is brutally beheaded on camera, so the pressure grows in Western capitals to do more. We drove towards a second Peshmerga position. In Paris, leaders from 30 countries, including Arab governments, were pledging their support for a coordinated campaign against IS in Iraq, but concrete details were in short supply. In 1991, British, French and American air support helped the Peshmerga defeat Saddam Hussein's army in northern Iraq. Now they say they're ready to take on Islamic State, but they need the right help.
This rocket-propelled grenade is held together with gaffer tape. We're fighting Islamic State with just these weapons. We haven't received any new weapons from anyone.
There's no sense here of preparations for a large-scale ground offensive, but if there were, that would be of little comfort to the second British hostage whose life is now in danger, or the many others who are being held by Islamic State inside Syria. IS is waiting just over a mile from here. Its fighters could come charging back up this road at any moment. Neither the Syrian government nor its principal backer, Iran, was invited to join the coalition of the willing in Paris today. In the absence of a unified strategy across Iraq and Syria, it's far from clear whether more bombing will have the desired result.
Friends, turning now to the pale horse in the sense of, as Christ put it, tarique, disturbances, mob seditions, internal strife within a country. Both sides in the Scottish referendum debate in the debate there have seized on plans to give Scotland's Parliament more powers if the country votes no. David Cameron, Ed Miliband, and Nick Clegg made the pledge in a signed letter and said the union offers voters the best of both worlds. But Scotland's First Minister Alex Salmond dismissed the plan, calling it a last-minute desperate offer of nothing. The NHS has also been at the heart of campaigning just 2 days ahead of the vote. James Cook has this report from Glasgow.
Suddenly it feels very real. Scotland is 2 days away. The vote on Thursday will forge this country's future for at least a generation. The Scottish Government chose the same polished steel metaphor 18 months ago when they chose the date. The campaign has been both long and intense. Now, the decision is upon us. The Yes campaign have put the NHS centre stage. Only independence can secure its future, they say. Health policy is already devolved to Edinburgh. But this document, handed to the BBC, suggests the Scottish Government may soon have to find £400 million in savings from Scotland's health budget.
We'll fight to protect the health service. I was health secretary. I know how hard it is to protect the budget of the health service when your overall budget is being cut. We did that, and we'll continue to do everything in our power to do that. But when your budget is being cut by Westminster, then that makes it harder and harder to do.
At sea, a sheet anchor is used to steady and secure the ship in times of emergency. That's Gordon Brown's role in Better Together in these last stages. His job to pull yes-voting Labour folk back into the pro-union fold.
Do you think we, the Labour Party, who created the National Health Service, who built the National Health Service, who funded the National Health Service, who raised taxes in the United Kingdom to pay for the National Health Service, do you think we would ever stand by and allow the NHS to be privatised or cut in Scotland?
Ed Miliband came to an Edinburgh shopping mall today, but increasingly Scotland feels like a place where minds have been made up. Late, very late in this campaign, Westminster has woken up to the reality that Scotland might just choose independence. So today, the three UK party leaders reiterated their joint pledge. They recognised the permanence of the Scottish Parliament, guaranteed the continuation of the Barnett formula, under which Scotland gets a higher share of public spending per head than the UK average. They said the Scottish Parliament would have more powers to raise its own taxes, and said it would have the final say over how much is spent on the NHS.
There are two immediate questions about the pledge. The first, is it credible? The Yes campaign is already arguing that the Westminster Parliament won't deliver these new powers once the threat to the Union is removed by a no vote. The second, will it work? The three party leaders clearly hope to persuade enough wavering Yes voters, perhaps those having a last-minute loss of nerve, that Scotland can have the best of both worlds by having the powers and freedoms of independent statehood without the accompanying risks of leaving the United Kingdom.
Tonight, Alex Salmond said the new powers being offered were not enough.
It's nothing like Devil Max, it's not even Devil Plus. It is actually an insult to the intelligence of the people of Scotland to rehash these proposals, last gasp in the campaign, and hope beyond hope that people think it's anything substantial. It is not.
Friends, you know, the real bottom line of that all comes down to whether God himself decides that it's time to, as he says in Leviticus 26, verse 19, to break the pride of the power of the sons of Joseph. Let me read that to you real quickly so we get it exactly like he says it there. Leviticus 26 and verse 19, starting in verse before that in verse 18. And if you will not yet for all this hearken unto me, then I will punish you 7 times more for your sins. This is a blessing coming from the blessing and cursing chapters, where he starts out saying, if you obey me, here are the many blessings I will give you individually and as a nation. And then he says, but if you won't, if you don't obey me, then just the opposite of those blessings. Here are the curses. And he says, as we just read in verse 18, that if you, after the curses begin, if you still don't hearken unto me, I'll punish you 7 times more, and I will break the pride of your power. If Scotland leaves the UK, it will definitely be a breaking of the pride of the power, of not only the pride, but the real power of the UK. You divide the house, that great power, it will no longer be any form of Great Britain if Scotland votes to go independent and goes out. Friends, we turn now to a story rather sad story. And, you know, feast is coming up. We're just a week and 2 days away from the Feast of Trumpets. That's a week from this Thursday, September 25. That's a day a friend of mine, a fellow college mate of mine from the class of 74, many of you know Aaron Dean. He was born in 1952 on the day of trumpets, the Feast of Trumpets. And since the calendar of the future, when Jesus Christ returns, we are not going to be using this old Roman calendar of the Holy Roman Empire. No way. That when that stone crushes the feet of the governments of this world, the calendar produced by the government of this world and its religious leader that sometimes rides the beast and will again ride the beast when the seventh head is resurrected, which, let's pull that chart up just real quickly. During the time of the fifth seal, during the Great Tribulation, this will be the time of the revival. This has not happened yet. This is the next major event in prophecy to occur. Right now we're watching news related to the four horses of the apocalypse. Apocalypse simply meaning revelation. We're watching news related to these four horses that Jesus Christ described in plain language as religious deception. They'll come, they'll come in my name saying I'm Christ, but they'll deceive many, and don't let them deceive you. That's the first seal, the white horse. The second seal, depicted by a red horse, Christ said it would be wars and rumors of war. The third seal, depicted by a black horse in Revelation, Christ said would be famines, scarcity of food. The fourth seal, we've already gone over that, the pale horse with its rider named Death. These are very active. You saw a lot of news related to that fourth seal tonight, some related to that red seal, to that red horse, the second seal. And the next major thing to happen in prophecy will be the fifth seal, the Great Tribulation, a time Christ described as the affliction of the saints. They'll take you up, they'll kill you, mass martyrdom of saints. And friends, it'll also be the time of the revival of the Holy Roman Empire. It'll be the time of the third round of world war. It'll be the time when two witnesses are roaming the earth and giving their testimony and witness to the world. The world won't like it. They'll attempt to, and they will. 3.5 days before Christ returns, they will extinguish, they'll kill the two witnesses on the streets of Jerusalem and won't bury them. They'll just leave them right there on the streets as they celebrate the deaths of those two men, whoever they're going to be. But this it'll be a time of great tribulation, and the point I was making is that the feast is coming up 1 week from Sam, I'll call you back as soon as my program is over, buddy. I forgot to take the phone out of the room, friends. I'm sorry. 1 week and 2 days from tomorrow is Feast of Trumpets. I was saying that calendar, the Roman calendar, won't be here anymore. And if you were born on a holy day on the Hebrew calendar in the year you were born, or whatever day you were born on in that Hebrew calendar, that's your real birth date on that Hebrew calendar. Although, really Christ says the day of one's death is better than the day you were born. He says that through Job. And when we get off into that, I got a few more stories we want to be sure and cover tonight. We're going to go a little bit over our usual half hour, but just a point of reference. 9 days from today, a week and 2 days from now, a week from this Thursday is the Feast of Trumpets. Following that, 9 days later will be the Day of Atonement. 5 days after that will be the Feast of Tabernacles. Many of you will be traveling, and you may want to reconsider where you're going. Perhaps just a maybe suggestion, because there's a lot of trouble in the world, as this next story will be covering. I'm going to put the pale horse up for this next story, friends, because as Jesus Christ described it, using the word tarake for one of the conditions between the third seal and the fifth seal. That only leaves the fourth seal, the pale horse. He said there would be tarake, disturbances, troubled waters, all that kind of thing. And that disturbance and that kind of thing relates to this story where police in Bangkok, Thailand, are investigating the deaths of 2 Britons in Thailand who they're looking for a number of suspects who killed these 2 Britons. They've eliminated the possibility of it being other British tourists. The 2 people who were killed yesterday, friends, were David Miller, 24, and Hannah Withridge, 23. They were killed on a beach in Koh Tao yesterday, having suffered serious injuries. And I read how they were killed. I may mention it after this video. Police said they're now focusing their investigation, you'll hear in this report, on the Burmese migrant worker community on the island. Jonathan Head has this report, friends, from Koh Tao.
A veil of sorrow hangs over this island. The shock of 2 young lives taken so violently here on a beach which has drawn fun lovers from across the world, it was hard to make sense of it. The presence of the police, more than 70 officers at one point, has been very visible. They've been questioning Burmese migrants who work in many of the resorts and taking DNA samples, convinced they will find their culprit here. They also have some closed-circuit TV pictures showing the couple after they left a beachside bar just before they were killed. And another man the police believe may have been following them. There's strong pressure now to solve this case quickly. Thailand's coup leader and now Prime Minister General Prayut Chan-o-cha announced that he'd ordered more police to the island to hunt down the perpetrators. People just cannot accept this, he said. David Miller and Hannah Witheridge had been part of the great globe-trotting movement of young people travelling the world. They'd met for the first time on Koh Tao.
This has to be the most unlikely place you'd expect to see a crime like this, and that, of course, is what the locals are hoping, that it is just a ghastly one-off, and that once it's solved, they'll be able to recover the laid-back vibe that's brought so many thousands to visit over the years. Jonathan Head, BBC News, Koh Tao, Thailand.
And friends, also something that relates to England, our next story. 2 delivery van drivers had a lucky escape when a pavement exploded in central London in July. The closed-circuit television footage released by Westminster City Council showed the incident, which happened near Piccadilly Circus. Council officials are questioning energy bosses from the company that provides the power for the UK Power Network. Last night, they were questioning them last night over the growing problem of pavement explosions across the capital. Presented in the news as such a major thing, that Ebola outbreak. I want to show you, without the audio, I'll just read the slides to you. A very well done 60-second outline done again by Michael Hurst that will explain this. The Ebola outbreak in West Africa is the deadliest occurrence of the disease since its discovery in 1976. The BBC News explains why the disease is so dangerous in this 60-second video produced by Michael Hurst. Ebola symptoms are diarrhea, vomiting, weakness, fever, and bleeding. It's spread by contact with bodily fluids. It attacks the internal organs and is highly infectious. The outbreak first reported in March. has now killed more than 1,000 people in West Africa. Infected people must be treated in isolation. Patients are given fluids to prevent dehydration. But there is no known cure. Current outbreak is killing 6 out of 10 victims. And that's the little 60-second video report there. Thank you very much for that one, Michael Hurst. Haiti's fight against the disease, friends, or not against that disease, but against any kind of disease that relates to the toilet. The 2010 Haitian earthquake displaced thousands of people, with many still living in temporary camps. Now, if you ever get into a situation where this may relate to you, you may want to pay attention to this story and how the people are wisely, according to biblical instruction, dealing with sanitation there. Poor sanitation has caused serious health problems in the country, but they're asking the question in this video: could a special eco-toilet improve the situation?
4 years ago, a major earthquake led to a serious health crisis, with more than 9,000 Haitians dying from a cholera outbreak. The disease is mainly spread through contaminated water, and poor sanitation was largely to blame. So one organization has been busy installing eco-friendly toilets to improve hygiene for thousands of people here. A simple action like this helps preventing diseases and saving lives in vulnerable, displaced communities.
Which is Creole for good smell.
This toilet is different from a normal latrine because after each use, a layer of organic material from sugarcane is added on top. This reduces the risk of infection.
The important thing to prevent cholera is making sure that you're cutting the chain of contamination from someone's human waste to someone else's water and food that they're ingesting.
Midia Demon and his family got an eco-friendly toilet 2 years ago.
Before we had these toilets, there was a community latrine. It wasn't good because some people didn't clean it. It smelled bad and there was a high risk of getting diseases. With this project, we have a better life because at night you can wake up, open your door, go to the bathroom and clean your own toilet.
The human waste is collected from these eco-toilets and then goes to a composting site where dangerous bacteria are killed.
We leave it for between 8 and 12 months. It has to be at a temperature of more than 130 degrees Fahrenheit to kill all the pathogens.
The result is a fertilizer that can be used in gardens like this one in Cité Soleil, the biggest tent city in Haiti.
At the beginning, some people said they didn't want to eat the food of this garden because it was grown in the soil from the toilets. Now, when they see how the plants grow, they realize there's no contamination.
The use of eco-toilets not only is preventing diseases by improving sanitation, but it could also help the country's agriculture in the long term too. Lorena Arroyo, BBC News, Port-au-Prince.
Okay, friends, as you heard her say at the end, that was Lorena Arroyo reporting from the Haitian capital of Port-au-Prince. Friends, I've got another one of those as we begin to close tonight. I got two more stories, one more story actually, but I've got this very good, I've got another from the archive, I've got another one of those 60-second outlines by Michael Hurst that this will relate to that red horse. Let's put that one back, put that one up here in preparation for playing this. 5 Fighting continues in Iraq, where Sunni militants, the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, ISIS as it was being called then, or ISIL, or now just IS, the Islamic State, have announced the creation of a caliphate. But what does that mean, and what do the jihadists really want? Those are the questions that the BBC will explain in this 60-second Michael Hurst video wonder here. Friends, I've got a license for the video but not the music, so I needed to stop that, and especially what goes into YouTube, I can't let any of that music get over there, or I'll get into a content ID battle we'll have to deal with, and without the license and the music, I would lose that one. So, let me reintroduce that, and we'll start it again. Well, I gave you the introduction. I'll just clip out that little part there for the YouTube archive. That means it'll be a little later getting the archive to you tonight, since I'm going to have to go back and edit that. I don't think we won't have a problem on our live show. We get away with a lot on those of you who watch the live stream, and I encourage everybody who can watch us live, because you can pray for the program as we go. You see me get in trouble on something, you can shoot up a prayer and say, God, help Steve. Give him some help. If you appreciate the program, I hope you'll deal with it in that way. All right, let's go for it again. Here is the BBC video explaining this in 60 seconds. Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. ISIS jihadists have declared a caliphate, an Islamic State ruled by one leader. They want to enforce their view of conservative Islamic traditions. You know, I'm going to stop it right there and just come out with you for just a second, friends, because last week, and I mentioned it last night, and we played the video, we repeated the video where President Obama said in his talk and in his address from Washington that ISIL, the Islamic State, was not Islamic. Excuse me. Well, somebody go get the president and have him watch this video. It's not only Islamic, Mr. President. They want to put in a caliphate. That's a one leader, that's a religious leader, and it's part of the Islamic religion. Now, following that, we played video last night showing how the Prime Minister of the UK stood there and stated that Islam is a religion of peace. So these people couldn't be of the Islam religion. Excuse me. The Islamic religion uses the Quran, which says that anybody who's not a Muslim, and it defines Muslim as practiced the Islamic religion, it says anybody who's not practicing that religion are infidels and they should be murdered, even in the most heinous of ways. Okay, let's go back to the video. The Caliphate covers ISIS-controlled areas in northern Syria, western Iraq, including Mosul, Fallujah, Talafar. Leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is now Caliph Ibrahim. Caliphs are seen as political successors to the Prophet Muhammad, religious leader. Baghdadi's men use social media to spread fear, with jihadists sharing gruesome images. Oh, so, Mr. Prime Minister of UK, this Islamic religion is a religion of peace? Yeah, tell me another one. ISIS, or the IS as it's being called now, or as the President of the United States and the military of the U.S. continues to call it, ISIL, has up to 10,000 fighters. Now, that was what was believed at the time this video was produced. Friends, it's now believed they have more than 30,000. They found out they were wrong by a factor of 3. 3 times as many as they thought. They have 3 times as many as they thought they had. They have over 30,000 known for their brutality. The group has assets worth up to $2 billion and weapons from bases it has overrun. And there's that little video for us, friends. And I've got one more we're going to close up with that would... The bridge was intentionally blown up for... The bridge was closed last year in Tennessee, and I've got just this little video to show you that this was done earlier today. Okay, and that was done in the United States state of Tennessee. And that should tell us one thing, friends. The bridge, they closed it last year because it wasn't safe to travel that bridge anymore. And that might tell you something. That bridge was built back in 1913, and we may have a lot of bridges in the United States that are not safe for travel. So you want to be careful, and those of you in charge of towns and cities and government and states, you want to be sure you're checking your bridges and making sure they are safe. And of course, it is a way that you want to also, for security, be watching your bridges, because it is a way, if an enemy got to them with explosives, you can see how easily a bridge can be demolished with dynamite. Friends, that's it for our report tonight, this Tuesday night edition of Nightcast. God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again tomorrow night, Wednesday night, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying so long and good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on COGTV.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the COGTV.org video archive.